We welcome everybody back for the House District Seat 39 Forum. On behalf of the Popcorn and Politics co-hosts, Shawnee, Lennox, and Overland Park Chambers, we welcome you back. I'm Phil Hammond. I'm co-chair of the Shawnee Chamber Government Affairs Committee. And for those of you who have not been here for the previous forums, the way it runs is 3 minutes opening statements. You have questions and answers with your response, 1.5 minutes, and then we followed up with a 2-minute closing statement. And we have drawn for who goes first, and that will rotate throughout the forum. I'd like to introduce the candidates for you, starting out with Michael Bolton, Democratic candidate. He was an Eagle Scout. He's currently an adult Scout leader, a graduate from the University of Houston. He has fulfilled career in strategic innovation and market analysis. He and his wife share a son and live in Shawnee. Owen Donahue, a Republican candidate, moved to Kansas in 1989 to start his own medical device company. He has owned a small business in Shawnee for more than 2 decades. He previously represented District 39 in 2006 to 2012. He and his wife live in Shawnee, where they enjoy his children and many grandchildren. And what we'll do is go to the opening statements, which will be 3 minutes long. And Michael, you will be first.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Bolton, and I'm running to represent District 39 in the Kansas House to bring a fresh voice to Topeka. I've lived in West Shawnee for 2 decades. I've raised a family here. I've given back to my community here. My wife and I chose to put down roots here because we believe the affordable housing, strong schools, and growing community would be a place that our community could thrive, and we did. But now I'm worried that the opportunities my son enjoyed from his schools are under serious threat. I'm concerned that the recent failed tax experiments damaged our community and our state. I'm ready to go to Topeka with a voice of common sense, a moderate who is eager to reach across the aisle and bipartisan solutions for real people's problems. During this campaign season, I have listened and I have learned. I have walked the neighborhoods of District 39 and I have knocked on the door of well over 1,000 homes. I've heard the heartfelt concerns about the direction of our state, and I stand before you ready to take on the key issues. We need a fair and reasonable taxation system. We need to invest in our schools. We need to expand Medicaid because it's the single biggest thing we can do to increase access to health care across the state. These federal dollars will improve the lives of an estimated 150,000 Kansans by increasing preventative health care and reducing expensive visits to emergency rooms. And there is so much more we can do to foster economic development across the state. Along with my plan for rural revitalization and economic green zones, I know we can also make a difference with government grants, TIFs, and more small business loans. I am well prepared to represent this district in Topeka. I've enjoyed a fulfilling and challenging career in strategic innovation and market analytics. The data I used brought ideas to my collective team, and together we drove market change with new products and services and processes. That business background will serve me well in Topeka, where I can bring fresh ideas and improve government efficiencies while maintaining a balanced state budget. In my youth, I watched the United States of America send astronauts to the moon and return them safely to Earth, proving what humans were capable of doing when we set our sights on the impossible. I was inspired by the soaring ideals of a different generation of leaders like John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., leaders who inspired us to be our greatest selves. Today, we only hear decisiveness and attempts to appeal at the lowest common denominator. I believe we can effect lasting change for future generations of Kansans if we stop clinging to what's best for me and instead nurture the ideas that are best for all of us. And I believe that I can start today. My name again is Michael Bolton, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you. Owen?
Thank you. Thanks for holding the forum and everything and the invitation. I appreciate it. Basically, you covered some of my History, I own a small business. I've been in business since '89 in the state of Kansas, Shawnee. And I've been married 50-plus years, 5 children, 16 grandchildren. So we're doing our best for the population growth there and everything. Anyway, I was in the legislature for 3 terms. I retired as not a career politician. I don't believe in it, but what's transpired since then, I felt that I had to get back in because I felt I had solutions for the problems and that are inherent right now, and that starts with the tax policy that we had. Part of the problems that transpired with the Brown-Beck administration and the fact that there was not the compromise there that everybody so highly touts, that if we go to Topeka, we should all compromise and get along and that type of thing. And it obviously didn't transpire, and it caused numerous and sundry problems. And having left, looked at it and said, there's got to be some better solutions, obviously, than what we're doing, not only with the tax policy, but jobs and schools and everything. So I said, I'm going to run again, and I think I can be more effective at making the changes that I believe need to be made. Thank you.
Okay, at this point we move on to the Q&A, and the very first question, and I'll read it once, and if you want to have it read again, let me know and I'll be more than happy to do that. But the first question is, what are your views on state tax policy? And Owen, you're the first.
I've done a lot of thinking on this, and again, as I kind of enumerated in the primary and then coming back to it, the thing that we want to accomplish is to attract business and jobs. So I sat there and I analyzed and I look at it and I tried to think of an economic model where it is extremely advantageous to tax yourself at one of the highest percentages around this surrounding area, surrounding states. And so I envision myself as a business that says, okay, where do I want to relocate to? All right, let's take a look at Kansas. Okay, their tax rate is unbelievable, higher than the rest of the states. Why would I want to move my business to Kansas? And I can't find one reason that I can come up with that's advantageous. So obviously, we have a tax problem, which then relates to a spending problem, and which we have to resolve if we're going to be competitive.
Okay. Michael?
Well, I'd like, I sort of look at this whole thing maybe different than most. I look at government as being more like a nonprofit, and we should look at how we're expensing our funds based on how well each of those departments are functioning within that same criteria. So if I was looking at the Department of Aging, are they at 32% of what we would see? And most times when we're looking to donate to a nonprofit, we're looking at a nonprofit that's going to get more to the cause rather than the overhead. We don't know what our overhead is. We don't really know what our cause is. I think it'd be most helpful for us if we looked at it from that perspective. Then I could analyze each of those different areas and we could see the improvements that we could be making. Some will be at 70, some will be at 30, some will be at 50%. And that's the areas that we could look to improve upon to reduce the amount of money that we need and hopefully then reduce our taxes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to question number 2, which is, with record low unemployment rates challenging businesses' ability to find enough employees, what would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce? And Michael, you're first.
Well, and this was mentioned earlier today, obviously I believe we need to look at schools from a different perspective. Not every child necessarily wants to go on to college. Many children drop out of school because there's a lack of interest there. So I would really like to see more collaboration, or, even if we had a high school that simply functioned as a high school that took in children that wanted to learn the trades and become experts at that, or more cooperation with JCCC so that the students could go back and forth. Obviously, we need more Kansans, and since 2012, there's only 48,000 people that have moved to this state, and most of those people were born here. In Colorado, 619,000 people have moved to Colorado in the same time frame. We need people to move to Kansas.
Okay. Owen?
One of the things I think that we can do is we've got to get people off of welfare where it's, say, financially advantageous for them to stay on welfare and not to get into the job market. And that means we got to force people to go to work and reduce, that will help with the labor force to increase that. Secondly, we have to increase jobs, and we can't increase jobs when we tax businesses so high they don't want to come in. So, it's a problem that we've created ourselves. It's a problem we can solve. We got to be more competitive in the tax area to encourage businesses to come in. When they come in, they bring jobs. When they bring jobs, obviously creates greater revenue, and it's just a cycle. So that's everything basically emanates from the tax issue and resolving that.
Thank you. Move on to question number 3. Topeka as a whole appears poised to refocus on the state's infrastructure. What would your priorities be in any new statewide transportation plan? Owen, you're first.
I think that, and it's good that they're looking at this, I think we have to focus on it from the standpoint of we're spending extreme dollars. I kind of got an idea of what transportation and transportation construction, when I was talking to a representative from Western Kansas, and we were talking about road works out there, that type of thing, and he said, "Oh, and you don't understand, when we do a major highway development, it's like an industry moving into our community." I'm like, wow, I never really thought of it that way. So, we want to keep the good roads because it helps us as far as transportation and attracting businesses and everything, but we have to do it in a fashion that is reasonable from the standpoint of what's the return on the construction that we do, keep the roads in good shape, and that type of thing. So that would be, I think we have to also stop taking money from the transportation fund. It's simply a bank, which I think is one of my goals would be to stop the rating of the transportation fund.
Okay. Michael?
Well, I'm looking at this a little bit different. I'd like to have us, as far as road work, public works, I would like to see us step forward as a state and utilize hempcrete instead of concrete. Hempcrete does not require any kind of gravel. It doesn't require rebar. It lasts twice as long as concrete. We could use it on all of our streets. We could use it on driveways. We could use it on our curbs. The value of it would be that it absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, so the actual roads we'd be driving on would be cleaning the air that our cars are causing a problem with. With the new industrial hemp bill, it gives us that opportunity for our public works, especially in our rural areas that need a lot of work and restructure. They don't have the funds of that, and we have a product that will last 20 years longer. Then that means the funds that they would be spending in the future, us as a state, would be less.
Okay. Question number 4. What are your views on funding K-12 education? And Michael, you are first.
Well, obviously an educated populace is the only way a republic can survive. To shortchange our children, shortchange us, makes no sense. So I'm obviously for full funding of public education and giving children of today the same opportunities that my son had when he went through public school. There's no doubt that we can find efficiencies. There's no doubt that, I think schools maybe are too large. Maybe our high schools are larger than they should be. When I went to school, we had 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and then 10, 11, and 12. If we could take that, maybe there's some children that are being isolated more because of the size of the schools that we have. I can remember going to college and taking a class in French, and there's 500 kids in there, and the first thing the teacher tried to do was get rid of 300 of us because they knew we weren't going to pass it in the first place, So, I don't know what else to say about it other than that.
Okay. Owen?
Yeah, again, I go back to the tax situation and everything, and most people realize of the revenue collected, we spend about 65% in total on the education system, okay? So obviously that's a concern number one. But here's the biggest issue I have with the education funding. So I take a look at how the money is spent, and there was an analysis done, various school districts and everything, and so when I looked at it, a lot of the money goes to administrative people. They add administrative people, and they pay them at a higher percentage, usually 6-7% increases. And then you look at the custodial workers, and we have people that are making $100,000 a year in custodial work in schools. I mean, it's huge salaries, okay? But when I look at what the teachers get, the percentages are down around the 1 to 2% increase. And we know that the teachers have the most effect after parents on students. How is it that we collect all this money, we give it to administration, we give it to custodial, we don't give it to the teachers, we lose good teachers because they're not compensated well enough, and then we wonder, why do we have an outcomes problem?
Okay. Moving on to question number 5. Describe what you see as a Kansas advantage when it comes to economic development and tourism, and the types of economic development policies you would support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas. And Owen, you're first.
If you take a look across the country, one of the things I look at, I used to work in the New York market, New York, New Jersey and everything, and I was there back during the time of Mayor Koch and everything, and he had this program where they wanted to keep these corporations in New York and New York City and everything, and people were abandoning it with the high taxes and everything, and we know their taxes are atrocious. So what have they done now? New York has created these enterprise zones, and their whole gist is, look at, we have these certain areas where we'll reduce your taxes so you can come in and you can grow your business or you can start your business. We want you in here, and we're willing to use tax incentives, tax reductions to get it. Again, the same thing. Why do I go back to the same point? It all emanates from your tax. And if you're going to tax people out of existence or severely hamper their growth, one of the major areas, and we all know, small businesses are where the jobs are created. About 85% of new businesses, small businesses, where new jobs are created. We need to have an incentive for the new business as far as a tax incentive, and we have some of that in western Kansas, but not enough, to incentivize the small businesses and nurture them maybe for a period of 2 or 3 years so they can bring about more jobs.
Michael?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question is, describe what you see as a Kansas advantage when it comes to economic development and tourism, and the types of economic development policies you would support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas.
All right. Well, on my website, I got a whole thing on rural fixing up rural Kansas, and what I want to do is drive economic opportunity in rural Kansas. Our property taxes are what pay most of what we have in education. We always sit there and struggle over those funds. What we need to do is raise all boats. We need to help our rural communities have upward mobility for their students. We need them to have higher paying jobs available to them. I want to utilize this new hemp industry that's building to create processing centers and draw manufacturing plants. I want Kansas to become a sustainable state where anybody who wants to come here and make cloth or plastic or concrete or eat the seeds or a numerous amount of things that hemp can be made for. If we could get publication at a state level to promote people to come here to save the world. I'm not talking about 50 different, I'm not talking about 50, 60 people maybe. It's a startup, it's a small guy, he wants to save the world, he wants to make clothing out of hemp. The farmer's growing it, we're processing it there, there's jobs right there. People move into those communities, 10 people move into Newton, that makes a difference for Newton. Newton then has a better industrial base, right? They've got business there. We're using the, I gotta stop, it says. You're worse than my wife. All right, I'll stop.
All right. Question number 6. What is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent in this race? And Michael, you're first.
Well, I don't know Owen well enough, but I know myself well enough. And I want to do this. I wanted to do this all my life. I believe I owe my country and my state, and I want to pay that debt. I'm 61, and I'm ready to start something new in my life and make a difference for the next 4. Owen's been there, I haven't. I've got a fresh voice, I've got a different way of looking at things, and that's going to benefit Topeka right now because they need a lot of common sense up there.
Okay. Owen?
As mentioned, I have experience. I think I was somewhat effective when I was there. I was in support of the Brownback tax policies and everything. The one thing that we knew and understood completely is that we had to stop spending, and again, there was an attempt at a compromise, never transpired. You cannot be successful when you cut taxes and you don't cut spending, and obviously it was a disaster, and we've tried since then to cut the spending, which hasn't transpired. So what have I learned? I've learned that, you know, cutting taxes is one thing, cutting spending is as important. And I had relationships with various legislators, both Democratic and Republican, to work towards some common solutions. And I think I have greater insight and can affect more change because of the relationship I have up there.
Okay. We will move on to the 2-minute closing statements, and Owen, you're first.
All right. As I mentioned, I've done a lot of thinking about this. I've looked at it, and to me, it's kind of astounding that the fact that we have gotten ourselves into this situation because of our taxes. Everything evolves around the taxes, okay? And again, the reason we generate the revenue is to spend on the schools. But yet we don't give the money to the people who affect the greatest change in the schools, and that's the teachers. And so the teachers are upset, they're frustrated, and they communicate to the parents and the students that they're not funded. Field trip is canceled because we don't have enough money. I spend my own money on my students because we don't have the money, but yet I've never heard of an administrator saying, you know, I spend X amount of money on the students here because we don't have enough money. You never hear that, or custodial people or anything. And so the thing is that we have to get back to the basics of realizing how are we going to affect change and outcomes in this state. And it's via the teachers. And what is somewhat disconcerting is the fact that we have this situation with the low pay for the teachers and everything, but yet we have $2 billion in unencumbered funds that are sitting there in the various school funds, and we don't utilize that. So we collect more taxes, we pay administrative custodial more, we don't pay the teachers, and then we put the rest in the bank and say we gotta have more money. So, you know, this has to change.
Michael?
Thank you, Chamber, for sponsoring this event and giving all of us candidates an opportunity to share our thoughts and viewpoints with the public at large. I've always aspired to be of service to my community at large, my state and nation, and now I have the time, the pathway, and the opportunity to pay it forward. In the aftermath of the last administration, now more than ever, Kansas needs a chorus of ideas to echo through the House and its chambers. Not the same old song. I'll be a fresh voice, a moderate voice, and with your support, our voice in this district will be heard for the first time in Topeka. In 1963, President Kennedy stated anyone can make a difference and everyone should try. I've listened, I've heard, I'm ready to lead, and I know I can make a difference. All I need now is your vote of confidence, and I'll get right to work for you and to the betterment of all Kansans.
That concludes our forum for House District 39. Let's give our candidates and participants. Thank you very much. I do want to point out, which is so important,